Welcome everybody, my name is Robius and today I bring you a new episode of Assassin's Creed The Real History, the series where we compare the representations of characters, factions, events, and locations depicted within one of the Assassin's Creed games to their actual history. Please be warned of major story spoilers ahead. For today's episode, we'll be exploring the history of the orator, singer, and participant in the French Revolution, Anne-Josèphe Théroigne de Méricourt, also known as Théroigne de Méricourt for short. To start, we will explore her background during the pre-game history, then we will cover her life in Assassin's Creed Unity during the in-game history, and lastly we will summarize the differences between her actual life and her portrayal in the game. Starting with the pre-game history, Anne-Josèphe Théroigne was born on August 13, 1762, to Pierre Théroigne and Anne-Elisabeth Lahaye in Méricourt, Rondeau. Her mother died during the birth of one of her siblings, and therefore she was raised by her aunt and taught to become a servant and seamstress. Anne-Josèphe was not pleased with her potential future and instead left her home, taking up different employment, such as being a governess and cowherder, until she eventually became a singer and courtesan. This new life had her traveling Europe, visiting England, Italy, and France from 1784 until 1789 when she arrived in Paris and became involved in the Revolution. This would be around the time where we first met Anne-Josèphe, who is now known by the more French-sounding Anne-Josèphe Théroigne de Méricourt in Assassin's Creed Unity during the co-op missions throughout the French Revolution. Unfortunately, both during her lifetime and beyond, there has been extensive propaganda released concerning her involvement in the French Revolution, and through the following years this has led to multiple interpretations of her history. For that reason, I will do my best to present the different possible interpretations, including her own account of these events and those from the press, which sometimes refer to her as the Patriot's Whore. In 1789, after her arrival in Paris, multiple public pamphlets claimed that she was directly involved in the storming of the Bastille on July 14th, and was later one of the leading figures during the Women's March on Versailles on October 5th of the same year. In contrast, other records indicate that Anne-Josèphe countered these statements by saying she was not involved in either the fall of the Bastille or the Women's March, since she instead lived in Versailles during those months and watched the political debates taking place at the National Assembly. In early 1790, she created La Société des Amis de la Loi with the help of Gilbert Rome. The purpose of this club was to participate in patriotic actions. However, Théroigne soon redirected her efforts into speaking publicly at the Club des Cordeliers with the goal of increasing women's presence in the patriotic movements and to establish mixed and women-only patriotic clubs. The press's negative representation of her continued until she left Paris in May of 1790, also due to her state of poverty. She returned home shortly, then traveled to Liège, where she was arrested by the Austrians and interrogated because they believed the French press and saw her as a major figure in the French Revolution. Although she was held for an extensive period, in which time she grew ill and depressed, her captors realized she was not a spy, nor a leading revolutionary figure, and released her in late 1791. In early 1792, she returned to Paris and spoke at the Jacobin Club about her imprisonment by the Austrians, for which she was greeted as a hero of liberty. For that reason, later that year she fought for women's rights to bear arms and for the creation of a militia battalion of women. Unfortunately, the population soon came to oppose these ideas, and she was reported to the Jacobins for causing unrest in the area. In August of that year, it is said she was involved in the attack on the Tuileries, and was also one of the figures present during the killing of the royalist prisoners in the Place Vendôme. One such record states that she recognized one of the royalists as François-Louis Sulot, one of the men who wrote most of the propaganda against her, and therefore she had him thrown to the angry mob who promptly killed him. For the remainder of the year, Théroigne was rather silent in terms of revolutionary activities, and by 1793 she had allied herself with the Girondist faction. Early that year she also started campaigning to further women's involvement in patriotic actions. On May 15th, however, she delivered a speech in the Jardin des Tuileries, and in reason of her support of the Girondists instead of their Jacobin rivals, she was attacked by a group of Jacobin women. For what they considered to be her betrayal, they stripped her and nearly beat her to death until one of the leading Jacobin figures, Jean-Paul Marat, intervened. Despite his attempt to stop the violence, the severe beating caused mental issues for the woman. Soon after, she was found to be acting erratically and was therefore certified as insane, for which she was institutionalized. Théroigne spent the majority of her remaining years in this hospital until she grew sick and died of this illness on June 9, 1817. In summary, depending on whether you consider her history through the interpretation of the French government or through her own recollection, it makes a big difference when deciding how accurate her representation in the game was. If you follow what is considered to be the propaganda-based interpretation of the government, she was rather well represented in Unity. However, if you take her personal recollection of her history, there are a few differences. In that case, first, Théroigne was not involved in the Women's March on Versailles, as she was actually living there around that time, attending the debates. Second, the co-op missions in which the Templars are stealing the people's food and that Théroigne works to get it back is fictionalized. However, it is somewhat representative of some of her revolutionary activities without being a direct interpretation. Third, although she was held down by women, she was not whipped by a male Jacobin as was shown in the game. It was instead beaten by women from her rivaling faction, only to be saved by Jean-Paul Marat. Lastly, she was not involved in the fall of the Jacobins, as was demonstrated in the co-op mission concerning the Jacobin raid. Overall, Théroigne was rather well represented historically according to the government's history on her. However, it could be considered that although there were some correct instances showing her recollection of her own life, Unity was far more inclined towards the records indicated in the French press at the time of the revolution. And with that final fact, we have finished another episode of Assassin's Creed: The Real History. I hope you all enjoyed this video, and if you did, I highly recommend you try out one of the Assassin's Creed games. Thank you all for watching. Please leave any suggestions for future characters, groups, events, or locations from any of the Assassin's Creed games that you'd like me to cover in the comment section below. Please rate, comment, and subscribe, and I look forward to seeing you all in a future historical episode.